Hello there and welcome to another season of Meet the Press Reports. I'm Chuck Todd. It is no secret that America has a gun crisis. We lead high-income countries in gun ownership and violence by depressing margins. And despite decades of debate, there's still no agreement on what to do about it. And as if we needed another reminder, just late last month, we witnessed yet another mass shooting. This one was in Lewiston, Maine. But we wanted to do an episode on gun violence a little bit differently this time, without talking to the usual suspects, the activists, the gun control advocates versus the Second Amendment supporters. We've seen that debate many times, and it feels like it's just a circular conversation. So instead, correspondent Ann Thompson and producer Mary Flum looked into scores of gun violent cases just from this year, and they found 3 individual stories that illustrate both the sheer randomness of this carnage, but also the humanity, the pain, the trauma, and yes, sometimes even hope that is left after the shooting finally stops. So joining me now with this extraordinary set of reporting, Ann Thompson.
Chuck, you know, one of the things we wanted to try to do in these stories is to hear from people you don't often hear from when we cover shootings. The people who see this carnage up close. Carnage that was once the exception, but is increasingly becoming the rule. No job or city is immune, and as one mother found out, life-changing crime can be revealed in a social media post.
Milwaukee is the other big city on Lake Michigan. 90 miles north of Chicago, it's home to Beer, the Bucks, and the Fonz. But these are not happy days.
A violent weekend in Milwaukee.
Milwaukee police are investigating 3 separate shootings.
6 shootings, 3 dead, all in a single-day outbreak of violence in Milwaukee.
While Chicago had more total murders last year, on a per capita basis, Milwaukee outpaced the big city to the south, 37.6 per 100,000 people versus Chicago's 25.8. It's been 3 record-breaking years of bloodshed. Milwaukee funeral director Tom Morris says work has been busy, very busy.
This year, how many homicide victims have you cared for?
Probably close to 50.
And how many of those have died from gunshot wounds?
Every single one of them.
Husband and father, 43-year-old Morris, says this is not the Milwaukee of his childhood.
There were several times this last summer where I want to say 7 out of 12 people that I prepared for burial were homicide due to gunshot.
7 out of 12?
7 out of 12. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the number is staggering. You'd almost think you're in a war zone.
All these guns out here.
Milwaukee is home for Jasmine Clemens and her family. 16-year-old Jashawn, her oldest son.
Jashawn was my bright child, my smart, quiet child.
He was your inside child?
That was my inside child. He was into his games and drawing, and then I pushed him like, you know, go make some friends, go outside. I pushed him out there a little bit. Sometimes I wish I would have just let him be what he was.
Yes, baby, turn around. Turn around.
On July 4th, Jashawn went out in the late afternoon. The teenager who Jasmine says always made it home for his 11 p.m. curfew didn't this time.
And I told my fiance, I'm like, hey, you know, this not like him. Let's go around and look for him. So we drove around. But before that, my friend came at 8 o'clock and told me that somebody was shot.
To her horror, she would find out what happened to Jashawn on Snapchat.
Somebody had kept texting my 15-year-old, asking, is Jay okay? Is Jay okay? And he kept asking them, like, why y'all keep saying that? And they sent the video of my son shot in the car.
Just 15 years old, Jaquel Clemens was the first to see the video of his lifeless brother on Snapchat before showing it to his family.
The idea that somebody took a video of your son after he had been shot.
People are so cruel. I did not want to see that. And it's for their gain, it's for social media, it's for them, it's for clout.
At the funeral home, Tom told Jasmine how many times Jashawn had been shot after she noticed a gunshot wound to his neck.
When she asked what we were looking at as far as number, I suggested probably close to 20 times.
What was her reaction?
Immediately she fell to the ground, yeah. Couldn't really stand to bear that news.
When a mother sees those kinds of wounds on her own flesh and blood, got to be brutal.
It's hard for us to see that. As fellow human beings, watching a mother have to experience, nobody should have to go through that.
Jasmine later heard that the source of all those bullets that killed her son likely involved a switch. A relatively new, cheap device that transforms ordinary guns into machine guns, enabling them to fire a barrage of bullets with one pull of a trigger.
Shot my son twice. That's overkill. He did not deserve it.
26 people were shot over the 4th of July weekend in Milwaukee, 4, including Jay Sean, killed.
It's slow motion mass murder.
Cavalier Johnson is Milwaukee's mayor.
Is this a question of laws, or is it a question of culture where we don't value life?
I think it's a little bit of both. It used to be that folks, if they had a disagreement, you'd argue and then they would walk away. Worse than that, they would get into a fist fight, right? And you'd have a bloody nose, but at least you'd live another day. Now, a simple disagreement with a lack of conflict resolution skills results in somebody pulling out a gun and shooting somebody.
Gun violence has impacted your family. Your half-brother is facing gun possession charges. How has that impacted your view of gun violence in this city?
I use my brother's example when I'm out there talking about gun violence. Look, my brother is a felon. He's a felon. And before I got elected, he had shot somebody 6 times. He shot somebody 6 times. Right, so he's exactly the person I'm talking about. And I love my brother, I do. But he shouldn't have his hand on a gun.
Funeral director Tom Morris's hope is for business, specifically shootings, to slow down.
If we could see what you see, how would that impact our attitude toward guns?
That's a great question. More personal responsibility for, I feel, legal gun owners, for sure. I being one of them.
You own a gun.
I certainly do. I have a concealed carry license. I exercise that right when I feel it's necessary. But I also take a personal responsibility and an interest in making sure when the guns are at home, they are locked up and secured and safe.
This also is not for
Some 4 months after Jay Sean's death, no one has been arrested for his murder. But the symbols of his life live on. Where he took his last breaths, Jasmine has decorated a tree. In her hair are Jay Sean's braids, woven into her own. And around her neck, his ashes.
Always on my mind, I love you forever. And this one, it says, I'm always here with you, Mama.
What's really frustrating here, Ann, is we don't know who did it.
No, and think about this. They have a video, but the video hasn't helped them identify suspects.
They don't know who the owner of the video is? They haven't been able to find who the suspect is?
They don't know what the motive was for killing Jay Sean, and that has left a huge hole in his mother's heart. She's already obviously lost her son, but now she doesn't know if she will ever get justice for losing his life.
Yeah, Karen, I mean, that is, look, a parent never gets over losing a child.
No.
But you don't even have an explanation.
Right. No.
That is something that it just only makes the suffering worse.
Yeah.
All right, what's the next story?
So the next story is, just think about this. Imagine you are doing your job. You're finishing up your shift, thinking about the weekend that's about to begin, the chores you need to run, your child's events you need to go to. And suddenly, it ends in a flash of gunfire, mere seconds that took the lives of 2 women, seconds that have reverberated for months.
It's a Thursday night at Star's Bar and Grill. Racks, breaks, and bets on the pool table. Cold beer flowing, the volume rising in this blue-collar watering hole. Half-hour drive from downtown Seattle.
We're all friends here. I could name half the people in this bar right now.
The den mother, Tina Nelson, Star's owner for 33 years, running the bar her way.
You try to hire female bartenders?
I like females. They're neater, 90% of my customers are men, and the men like female bartenders. They're just stronger workers.
Customers may get intoxicated, but not dangerous, staff tell us. That changed on May 21st. Closing stars in the wee hours, seasoned bartenders 38-year-old Jessica Hone and Katie Dunkey, 37, best friends and roommates. Tara Weisar attended bar with them.
They were both just kind of life of the party. Like Katie would always come in and everybody here knew her, even if she was like not on shift. I usually worked with Jessica on Fridays, and then Katie would just come with her. She'd help us clean up at the end of the night. Medium rare.
Danny McCready, longtime Stars manager, describes Katie and Jessica as talented professionals who knew how to handle their customers.
What made Katie such a good bartender?
Her no attitude. Yeah. She's just like me. She doesn't let nobody mess with her, and she jokes around, and she has a good time, and people are laughing. She's laughing.
Jessica is a mom. She has a 14-year-old son.
She absolutely adored him, did everything for him. I mean, her whole life was her child. It was. And providing for him. She was a very good mom and a single mom.
But sometime around 3 a.m. on that Saturday, their attention was drawn to the parking lot. According to police, the women allegedly found 31-year-old Samuel Ramirez Jr., a semi-regular at Stars who had been at the bar earlier.
What is the truth about the morning of May 21st?
The truth is that it was a completely normal night up until it wasn't.
Also in the parking lot that night, Russell Belden, a customer helping Katie and Jessica close, speaking on television for the first time. Belden says there was a confrontation between the women and Ramirez. Belden told police Ramirez pushed Katie, then punched Jessica.
You knocked him down.
Yes.
He gets back up, and what happens?
He shot Katie point blank in the head, and then Jessica tried to run, and he shot her in the back, and then he turned his pistol towards me and started shooting at me while I was running away.
How many times were you shot?
I was only shot once through my arm, but he shot at me at least 9 or 10 times. Within 90 seconds, it went from just an argument to a fight to attempted triple murder, but a double homicide.
There are scars on Belden's elbow where the bullet hit him, and on the shoulder he broke running away and falling. Police and paramedics rushed to the scene, but they could not save Katie or Jessica. Imagining Jessica's last moments haunts Danny.
Jessica was terrified. It breaks my heart to just even try to imagine the fear that she was going through. She probably did think of her child. I know I would.
Like I said,
Tina got the call at 5 a.m. and raced to the bar.
The girls were laying out there covered up. I just couldn't bring myself to even look that way. But once I came inside, I had to keep going to those doors and looking out, thinking this is just not true. This can't be happening.
And you stayed all day?
I did. Their bodies weren't taken until 5 p.m. And I just could not bring myself to leave until they did.
Months later, the laughter is back at Stars, but business is down by 50%, Tina says, and the sadness lingers.
For this to happen to those two girls, it just hurt us. Like, it blows my mind.
On Friday nights, Jessica and Tara always wore coordinating dresses.
What do you do these Fridays now?
Well, for the first few weeks. Sorry. The first few weeks, I just kind of refused to wear a dress. And then finally, after a few weeks, I was like, you know what? I'm going to continue my dresses on Fridays. It's like an ode to like her. So I'm like, I'm still continuing the dresses now on Fridays. It's just, I just do it by myself.
The changes go beyond Stars, impacting an entire community's and industry's sense of safety. Lindsay Michaels is a bartender at a neighboring bar in Federal Way.
Do you feel safe doing your job now?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that.
Lindsay says the shootings have made her think twice about work.
It's very hard for me sometimes to cut somebody off or ask them to leave because that's my job. But it's tough. I don't work alone with a female anymore. I have a male bartender that's with me all the time, so that makes me very comfortable.
Still unknown just what allegedly provoked Ramirez. We spoke to 2 staff members at Stars who say Ramirez made advances on Jessica earlier in the evening, writing her a suggestive note, and that Jessica turned him down. According to police, Ramirez has yet to be found. There is a warrant for his arrest in connection with the murders of Katie and Jessica and the attempted murder of Belden. Mere seconds, forever altering so many lives.
What did the world lose when they lost Katie and Jessica?
Well, his son lost his mother. We lost 2 very special people.
What would you tell people who've never had someone close to them shot and killed?
Boy, how much it hurts. It really hurts to know that your life can change in just a second.
So as you and I are sitting here, it's about 5 months removed from when they were killed. You're about 6 weeks removed from when you were visiting with these folks. So then they didn't know where he was. Any update on finding the shooter?
They still don't know where Ramirez is, and that's not the only thing that's hanging out there, Chuck. What has really struck me is that how this shooting has impacted the bar and the larger community. Tina hired her first male bartender as a result of this. While the staffers love Stars and they love Tina, the pain is too much. At least 3 staffers have left the bar, and other people in that entertainment community are rethinking their own safety because they just don't know anymore. They don't trust.
We've seen this. That's why sometimes with these incidents, they end up just bulldozing the place. They get rid of it. Sometimes people don't want that memory.
Yeah, but Tina wants to hold on to the bar.
I bet you she does.
We'll see if she can.
All right. We're going to pause here for a second. When we come back, you're going to hear the story of a woman who's trying to find common ground on guns after very nearly becoming a statistic herself. Stay with us. And we are back. Ann Thompson is back with me. She's got one more story. It's the inspiring tale of a Kentucky woman whose own shattering experience with guns led her to become an advocate for conciliation and change. And it's hard to describe something like this as upbeat, but in the issue of guns, this one is.
This is the hope, Chuck. As we've reported these stories, I've really been struck by how many people genuinely believe that solutions are possible and that some of the most fervent advocates for solutions are gun owners themselves. For them, guns are instruments of sport and tradition tied to family history and culture. This is not for them a zero-sum game where everyone has guns or no one has guns. The solution, they believe, is in that elusive middle. And leading that effort is a woman from Kentucky using her incredible survival story to build a path towards common ground.
Not the green one.
In Whitney and Waller Austin's living room is an arresting piece of art, a wall of guns. Not what you would expect in a home with 2 young children, but almost everything about Whitney Austin is unexpected. The Louisville, Kentucky wife and mom is an accidental activist.
I'm a peacemaker. I have no desire to fight about anything.
Yet she is fighting hard to drastically reduce gun violence in the U.S., not by eliminating guns, but by getting both sides of the gun debate to find a middle ground.
Do you feel safe?
Spurred by what she calls a miracle. But more on that later. Whitney, a former banker, works from Kentucky, where more than half of households own at least 1 gun, including her own.
Are people surprised that you guys own guns? I think maybe people outside of Kentucky are surprised, but you've got more gun owners in this state than you have non-gun owners.
At times, Whitney says she feels like she's fluent in 2 languages, able to converse with both gun owners and the anti-gun lobby, working to establish a dialogue between the 2.
We have to bring people together. This issue has been plagued by a lack of common ground.
And she's making headway. Among those listening to Whitney, Senator Mitch McConnell.
We have been working on trying to get him to a place of common ground for many years.
After lobbying last year for the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, McConnell invited Whitney to be there when the Senate passed the bill.
This is a monumental day.
Signed into law by President Biden, the act expands background checks for gun buyers under 21 and provides more funding for mental health, school safety, and state red flag laws. For Whitney, it is proof positive her push for a common ground is working.
Are you optimistic that you can solve this problem? I always have more hope than the average human. I think that's natural when you survive 12 bullets.
And that, surviving 12 bullets, is the miracle we mentioned earlier. On September 6, 2018, Whitney was a vice president of Fifth Third Bank, running late to work at the bank's Cincinnati headquarters. She pushed the revolving glass door to enter the building, and in an instant, everything changed.
As soon as I pushed is when the first barrage of bullets hit me.
What did it feel like?
It felt like maybe being on fire, and I thought, these must be bullets. And then my next thought was, this is a mass shooting. That's what this has to be. That's what happens in this country.
Whitney had walked into a mass shooting, a gunman entering the bank just moments earlier. Of the 35 bullets he fired, 1/3 struck Whitney in just 60 seconds.
I definitely thought I was going to die. I was coughing up blood. I was saying my prayers.
Whitney did the only thing she could do. She played dead, long enough for police to rescue her and call Waller.
She was all bandaged up, gauze everywhere, blood everywhere, saturated. But she looked like an angel. It's the day that changed our life forever.
This is from the humerus.
Incredibly, not a single bullet penetrated an organ or major artery. Doctors told Whitney she was a miracle. And inspired by that miracle, Whitney set out to work towards another miracle, finding a way to reduce mass shootings in the U.S.
As I was being shot, some of the thoughts flying through my brain were, I can't believe this is me. I've watched this on the news, but I thought it would never happen to me, and it's happening to me. And I've done nothing to stop it. And so I was really convicted from the beginning that if I lived, that I would do something about this thing that I had seen from afar.
From her hospital bed, Whitney and Waller launched their foundation, Whitney Strong, aimed at education, prevention, and legislation. One of Whitney's staunchest allies, fellow Kentuckian Mark Bryant.
Well, you're going to see something you normally never see.
Bryant is the executive director of the Gun Violence Archive, an up-to-the-minute picture of how many shootings occur each day in America.
You've done this for a decade. What kind of trends have you noticed?
There's more violence, there's more anger, and because there's more guns being sold, there's more people with guns, and so you have anger and proximity to weapons. That causes a problem. You got it, guy. You take care.
Bryant works through the night, every night, going through police reports and media, seeing in which of 40 categories the shootings fit.
I'm not ever going to be the guy that says, let's ban guns, but there is a wide difference between being an absolutist on either side of this.
Like Whitney, Mark believes the key to reducing gun violence in the U.S. lies in tapping into a middle ground.
What is that middle?
It has to be safety. I use as an example the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. They are not against alcohol. They are not against driving. They are not against people that drink. They are against this lethal combination. And that's how it is with gun violence, at least in my head.
Whitney's shooting is one of the Gun Violence Archive's 5,000 data points of mass shootings. A mass shooting defined as involving 4 or more people. In Cincinnati, 3 died, 2, including Whitney, survived.
This one isn't quite level.
The shooting inspired Waller, a professional artist, to make this piece. Replicas of the gun used to shoot Whitney, each displayed with the number of bullets fired, 35. A physical reminder of what the family's been through and what they are fighting for.
I'm doing this because of my kids. I think mostly people are doing it because of their kids. And that is a very strong conviction. There's no one over here whose conviction for the Second Amendment, the Constitution, that will ever be stronger than my conviction for my kids.
I want to give my thanks again to Ann Thompson and her producer, Mary Flum, for some truly remarkable reporting on guns in America. As we were saying, it is happening everywhere. And joining me now are two guests that you've already met through Ann's reporting. Whitney Austin, she's the executive director and co-founder of Whitney Strong in Louisville. And Tom Morris is the funeral director at Wachovia Funeral Home in Milwaukee. Appreciate you both coming in and sharing your stories. Tom, I just want to start with you. I think Ann last sat down with you about 6 weeks ago from when we're sitting down here. How many more gunshot victims have you had to deal with?
I've had 4 since then, since our last meeting, unfortunately. Yeah.
Is this something that you think the American public should see, what you see? If that the public saw what you saw, what these gunshots do to the human body, that it would give some pause?
Certainly. I think I've always kind of been in the mindset, seeing is believing. It's really the background on what I do as a funeral director. We create a situation that seen as believing. We've lost someone, right? And kind of same holds true with the scenarios that we face in our lifetime. I think if the general public did have some sense or awareness to what actually does happen, this isn't the movies, it's not made for TV, this is real life. And people are losing lives over it, and the survivors are greatly and deeply affected over this, absolutely.
When you're sitting down with somebody like Mitch McConnell, who's certainly got his own beliefs about what the laws should be, you think he gives pause on how he talks with you because he knows you're a survivor?
For sure. I think my story and stories of gun violence are very powerful, and they play a role in convincing people to think differently. And so absolutely, I think that my story has impacted him, but not only my story, stories of other Kentuckians who have lost their lives to this. What's
the, when you're trying to bridge this common ground, right, which is 90% of Americans are here. We know this. Nobody wants this. This is one of those, I'm always very frustrated. We have fewer. Everybody wants the same thing. We just don't know how to get there. And yet, you have some hope. Why?
Because I see every single day evidence for hope, whether it's the conversations that I'm having with lawmakers in the Kentucky State Legislature to the conversations that I'm having in Capitol Hill. I see it every single day. And not only that, we've seen real success. The passage of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first piece of federal gun safety legislation in 28 years. So I certainly understand we have a long way to go, but we've seen success and we should not give up.
What's something you think is the next thing that's possible?
So in the state of Kentucky, we are working really hard on a temporary transfer law, which means when gun owners are in a crisis moment, that we have a civil path to temporarily transfer their firearm away and get them help, whether they're struggling with suicidal thoughts or they're struggling with thoughts of harming others. And so I think that is our first opportunity for change in the state of Kentucky. And then outside of that, I think there are other policies where there's broad support. Background checks, making sure that we increase the buying age to 21, making sure that we wait 3 days before people are able to purchase a firearm. These are all examples of policies that have broad support on both sides of the political aisle.
I think this was made clear in the piece that you're both gun owners.
Correct, yes, I am.
And you're a gun owner, safety, sport, both?
A little bit of both. I exercise my right to carry using the concealed carry license to do so.
You ever felt unsafe doing your job?
I have a few times, yeah. Sometimes we go into areas that are, less than, I guess, desirable, for lack of a better way to put it. Just want to be mindful of my surroundings at all times. And that includes where I live out in the suburbs as well. I also, too, I do enjoy things like trap shooting and pheasant hunting. And I've always just really kind of learned from a young age that you have firearms in your possession, you're responsible with them. So it's never been a question.
You keep coming back to you just think gun owners ought to be held more accountable. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, to me, we talked a little bit before we started today, about the gun thefts from vehicles. And
Ann Thompson, just to fill in the viewers so it doesn't look like you're eavesdropping on a conversation you may have missed, right? You don't have to rewind here. And Thompson was saying when in her conversation with the mayor that actually one of these, a lot of stolen guns, and one of the targets is essentially parked cars during a Milwaukee Bucks game because you can't bring the gun into the arena.
Correct.
Understandably so. You wouldn't want that. And thieves target it.
Yeah, so, kind of going with that theme, as being a responsible gun owner, I wouldn't park my car in any venue, any place, and not have it secured. They make gun safes that attach to the underside of the seat with secure cabling. Not just taking, my concealed carry firearm and putting it in my glove box and kind of, walking away. That's just kind of, it's not responsible gun ownership. And if we're learning that this is really, an issue in Milwaukee and certain other cities then as well, if we're responsible gun owners, then we should have a level of accountability to fulfill that, responsibility of owning that firearm. Absolutely.
It's interesting on this issue of personal responsibility. When you ask the public this, they're like, yes, most gun owners, I'm willing to go through a background check. I'm willing to do these things. Yet when it gets to the political arena, it gets the louder voices on the extreme end of the conversation seem to dominate and scare these politicians. How have you dealt with this?
I think it's really important that we take those voices that are representing common ground and we get them in front of elected officials. So certainly I'm an example of one of those voices, but there are many more Americans like me. We need to elevate these voices of common ground, because then you can really have a thoughtful conversation and you can figure out where there is overlap and what can move. And that's what we saw last summer with the passage of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and that's what we're seeing in Kentucky right now with our car bill.
You know what some Second Amendment advocates will say, well, this becomes a slippery slope, that the real goal of advocates that maybe agree with you on this, the real goal is they want to outlaw the AR-15, or they want to outlaw assault weapons for common people. And they see that as too extreme. Do you have advice for some other gun control advocacy groups about how they should be messaging?
I think it's important that we focus where we agree. There are absolutely advocates out there that are focused on banning firearms. And I think that at this moment in the history of our country and with the carnage that we're all left to deal with, that we have to focus on common ground. And so absolutely.
Or reality.
Yeah, reality and common ground. And the reality is, most gun owners are responsible. They should not be demonized. And so we need voices on Capitol Hill, voices in state legislatures representing that. We're trying to make sure that gun owners are responsible and our country is safe from violence.
I was really moved by the gentleman who runs the gun archives, the gun violence archives, Tom, when he said that the model might be Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. They're not against drinking. They're not against driving. They're safety advocates. That's all. They're safety advocates. Whitney, you strike me simply here as a safety advocate. You're just trying to save lives. You're not trying to tell somebody how to live their life.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, it seems pretty easy to rally around, and yet yet it's elusive.
Yeah, I wish I had an answer for that. Trying to get voices heard, I think, as Whitney mentioned, I think is instrumental in taking the first steps to making things safer for all of us as citizens, and still being able to be afforded of our rights, so to speak, to bear arms. There's some great talking points with that, but at least it's a step in the right direction. Absolutely, and safety is. I learned way back, my dad, and learning in hunter safety, for example, know of your target and what is beyond. You never point your gun at something you wouldn't shoot at. Safety first was always kind of the motto, I guess. Because
I'm old enough to remember when the NRA used to be the safety. That's really what they were. They were a gun safety organization. Taught you in the 70s and 80s when I was first exposed to it. That's what they did. One of the simple things you want to do is to make sure that a simple handgun doesn't get turned into a machine gun. I mean, he saw 20 bullets, or you didn't need 20 bullets to kill somebody, type of thing. Is that where there's progress to be made?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the definition of anti-safety. So where are the areas in which we can move? And in order to get to those places, again, we have to have the right voices. We have to be good listeners. And we also have to come from a place of education. You know, that's one thing that I find, no matter where I am, that lawmakers, even everyday Americans, don't understand a lot about this issue. And so if you're left to make informed decisions, you need to be educated first. And so I think it's a lot about listening, it's a lot about being respectful, and it's a lot about educating.
Well, and it's a lot about, I think, sometimes keeping the elected officials sometimes away from the debate. Those that are closest to it, the two of you have been much closer to it than many of the folks right next door to where we're taping right now.
And we'd love to collaborate with them, I think, and, you know, again, just start that
They ought to spend a
conversation.
day with you and see what you do.
Invite them to any time. Our door is always open.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think it would be eye-opening. Whitney and Tom, appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
That's all we have for this episode. Thank you for being here. And next week, we're going to look at being pregnant and black. Why do pregnant black women in America face such high mortality rates? Right here in the United States of America. We're going to have two stories of two African-American women whose pregnancies ended with very different results. That's the next episode of Meet the Press Reports.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.